For more than 130 years, the mystery of Jack the Ripper has cast a long, bloody shadow over history. His name, seared into the public consciousness, remains etched across the dark, fog-drenched alleys of Victorian London.
Nowadays.
But then, in the year 2025, a shocking revelation sent shockwaves through the world. Experts claimed they had finally cracked the case. Drawing upon a combination of DNA analysis, historic documents, and advanced forensic techniques, investigators pointed to one Minarin Kosminski. He was a troubled Polish barber whose disturbing past had long been buried in silence. But is this the long-awaited end of the mystery? Or has it sparked a whole new wave of controversy? In this video, we'll dive deep into the new findings, unpack the backlash from critics, and explore why the supposed answer might be even more unsettling than the enigma itself, the slayings that shook Victorian London back in the autumn of 1888. The grim, narrow alleyways of Whitechapel Inn, impoverished district in East London, were transformed into a nightmarish backdrop for one of the most infamous killing sprees in history. 5 women were murdered in the dead of night, each attack marked by a brutality that defied comprehension. Their names: Marion Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, are now known to history as the canonical 5. Each woman was mutilated in a way that suggested not random violence, but cold calculation. In some cases, internal organs were removed, and the methodical nature of the attacks hinted at someone skilled, deliberate, and deeply disturbed. Victorian London was already a city of dramatic contrast. The rich lived in opulent luxury, while the poor struggled to survive amid disease, overcrowding, and crime. Nowhere was this divide more glaring than in Whitechapel, a place where desperation clung to the cobblestones like the ever-present fog. In this harsh landscape, the slayings struck like a brutal blow. These weren't crimes of impulse, killers, method, the intensifying violence, the close proximity of the crime scenes all suggested someone following a twisted routine. This wasn't just a lunatic on the loose, it was a calculated predator evolving with each strike. The public response was pure terror. The press, eager to boost circulation, splashed the horrifying details across headlines. In the process, they gave the killer a name that would become legendary: Jack the Ripper. That name originated from a series of chilling letters allegedly sent by the killer to the police and press. One particularly gruesome letter, dubbed the From Hell letter, even included part of a human kidney. Though the authenticity of these letters remains a hot topic of debate, their impact was undeniable. The city descended into hysteria. Fear surged through the streets, and the Ripper became a symbol of chaos and dread. Despite massive police efforts, the killer remained elusive. Hundreds of officers scoured the city, questioned suspects, and enlisted doctors to develop profiles. Theories circulated wildly. Artists drew ominous sketches of men in top hats and cloaks lurking in shadows. But none of it led to an arrest. Dozens of interviews, late-night stakeouts, and desperate public appeals yielded nothing. The killer slipped through the cracks again and again. Jack the Ripper didn't just murder, he humiliated the police, tormented the public, and exposed the vulnerabilities of the British Empire itself. Even Queen Victoria expressed frustration, urging authorities to act swiftly. Then, after the savage killing of Mary Jane Kelly, the final and most gruesome of the 5, the murders stopped as suddenly as they had begun. No more bodies. No more letters, just eerie silence. And in that silence, a legend was born. Jack the Ripper became more than a killer. He was a haunting shadow, a terrifying reminder that even in the heart of civilization, monsters could walk unnoticed. Over time, the case evolved into a mirror reflecting society's darkest corners: poverty, misogyny, mental illness, and institutional failure. The mystery has haunted generations. Who was he? How did he vanish? And why, in the heart of the world's most powerful empire, did no one catch him? The barber in the fog. What the public didn't know at the time was that the police quietly suspected someone all along. A man who blended into the background, hiding in plain sight. His name was Aaron Kosminski. And it would take more than a Century and one blood-stained piece of fabric is named to return to center stage. If he'd wandered through Whitechapel in the late 1880s, you might have passed Kosminski without a second glance. Maybe he was leaning quietly outside a barber shop, scissors in hand, vanishing into the mist of London's gloomy streets. To most people, he was just another FISA Polish immigrant trying to build a life in a harsh city. But to a few detectives at Scotland Yard, he was a figure of growing suspicion. And in 2025, his name emerged again. This time as the most likely identity behind the infamous Jack the Ripper. Aaron Kosminski was born in 1865 in Kłodawa, Poland. Like many Eastern European Jews at the time, he fled growing anti-Semitic violence and persecution. He arrived in London in the early 1880s and settled in Whitechapel, a district already bursting with tension and poverty. Life for immigrants there was hard. Kosminski found work as a barber profession requiring razor-sharp precision with a blade. A small detail, perhaps, but a deeply unsettling one when viewed in hindsight. What made Kosminski especially concerning wasn't just that he lived near all the murder sites. It was his erratic behavior and psychological profile that caught the attention of authorities. In a confidential 1894 memorandum, Assistant Chief Constable Sir Melville Macnaghten named Kosminski as one of 3 prime suspects. The note described him as harboring an intense hatred of women and exhibiting homicidal tendencies. This wasn't mere speculation. These were the inner thoughts of investigators deeply involved in the case. Despite their suspicions, the police never arrested Kosminski. They simply didn't have enough solid evidence. No fingerprints, no forensic testing, no surveillance. This was, after all, the 19th century. Although some accounts claimed that Kosminski was picked out during a secret lineup, the witness refused to testify, afraid that identifying a fellow Jew might trigger a wave of violent backlash. The investigation stalled. Kosminski's mental health deteriorated rapidly. By 1891, he had become delusional and was institutionalized after threatening his sister with a knife. He ended up in Colney Hatch Asylum, diagnosed with severe psychosis, auditory hallucinations, and religious mania. He stopped bathing, spoke in broken fragments, and never recovered. He remained there until his death from gangrene in 1919. A tragic decline, but could it also have been the quiet, unnoticed disappearance of one of history's most notorious serial killers? One chilling detail that fuels suspicion is his profession. Victorian-era barbers weren't just hairstylists, they often performed minor medical procedures, from bloodletting to dental work. Kosminski may not have received formal training, but his job could have given him just enough anatomical knowledge to carry out the mutilations seen in the Ripper crimes. He didn't need surgical school. He needed only the rough, brutal skills learned in a violent world. The shawl that changed everything over 130 years passed, and the Jack the Ripper case remained unsolved, just a maze of theories, guesses, and gruesome lore. Then, in 2025, the narrative shifted dramatically. But the turning point didn't come from a confession or a newly found murder weapon. It came from a seemingly mundane item, a shawl. Tattered, stained, and wrapped in mystery, it became the key piece of evidence in the most dramatic twist in the Ripper investigation. The shawl was allegedly found near the body of Catherine Eddowes, Jack the Ripper's 4th victim, who was killed on September 30th, 1888. According to family legend, Sergeant Amos Simpson retrieved the shawl from the crime scene, intending to give it to his wife. She was horrified and refused the grisly gift. The shawl was packed away and eventually passed down through generations as a chilling heirloom. In 2007, the shawl resurfaced during an auction and was purchased by author Russell Edwards. Where others saw a dark memento, Edwards saw potential evidence. He reached out to molecular biologist Dr. Jari Louhilainen to examine the fabric using modern forensic techniques. Under ultraviolet light and through microscopic analysis, Louhilainen detected bloodstains that matched Eddowes' known medical condition, Bright's disease, which affects the kidneys. This suggested the shawl had indeed been near the victim at the time of the crime, but the real shock came from the presence of semen stains. Louhilainen extracted mitochondrial DNA from the cloth and matched it to a living descendant of Aaron Kosminski's sister. He and Edwards declared the match conclusive, The DNA of both victim and slayer had allegedly been found on the shawl. In 2019, the findings were published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. And by 2025, they ignited global headlines. Edwards even released a book, Jack the Ripper, the definitive casebook, and made media appearances claiming the mystery was finally solved. The public reaction was electric. Headlines blared, "Jack the Ripper identified," and social media buzzed with excitement. True crime enthusiasts rejoiced. But not everyone was convinced. DNA and a divided scientific world. The controversy surrounding the shawl quickly escalated. For many scientists, the evidence simply didn't hold up. At the heart of the dispute was the type of DNA used in the analysis, mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from the mother and shared by thousands of people. In the crowded immigrant communities of 1880s Whitechapel, that meant Kosminski's DNA could match many others. It only proved someone from his maternal line was present, not that he committed the crime. Even more concerning was the shawl's chain of custody, or lack thereof. There was no official record from 1888, proving it came from the crime scene. It stayed in private hands for over a century, moving through families, collectors, and auction houses. That alone raised serious questions. Was it even safe or ethical for a sergeant to take blood-soaked evidence home as a gift? Renowned experts like Dr. Turi King, who famously identified Richard III's remains, pointed out that the shawl's history was anecdotal and unreliable. Without controlled handling or proper preservation, the chance of contamination was high. Forensic scientist Walter Parson dismissed the entire study as unpublishable nonsense, citing the absence of raw data and lack of transparency. The Journal of Forensic Sciences, which had published the original study, issued an official expression of concern in 2024. They noted missing data and the inability to replicate the results, both fatal flaws in the scientific community. Dr. Lou Hillinen, while respected, refused to share the full methodology or DNA sequences, prompting accusations of confirmation bias. After all, he was working closely with Russell Edwards, who had a vested interest in proving Kosminski's guilt. To make matters worse, the shawl had reportedly been handled by numerous people over the years, many without gloves or any protective gear. Experts noted this introduced modern DNA into the sample, making it nearly impossible to isolate an uncontaminated genetic profile. As a result, the once celebrated breakthrough became a symbol of both promise and peril in forensic science. Though the case against Aaron Kosminski remains stronger than ever in public imagination, the scientific community remains deeply divided. As of 2025, the Jack the Ripper case is still technically unsolved. The DNA may have brought us closer to an answer, but it also cracked open new debates. The deeper we dig, the more unsettling the mystery becomes. The mystery of Jack the Ripper has haunted London for over a century, and even after more than 130 years, his true identity remains one of the most perplexing, unsolved cases in criminal history. Countless theories have emerged, suspecting everyone from local butchers to royal family members. Yet no one was ever definitively identified or brought to justice for the brutal murders that terrorized the East End of London in 1888. The question has always lingered. Who was Jack the Ripper? Many believe that modern science, particularly DNA technology, might eventually uncover the truth. For years, fragments of clothing and letters believed to be linked to the case were preserved, studied, and even displayed in museums. Among the most notable pieces of evidence was a blood-stained shawl allegedly found beside the body of Catherine Eddowes, one of the Ripper's 5 confirmed victims. This shawl became the centerpiece of a decades-long effort to crack the case with forensic science. In 2014, a major breakthrough appeared to be on the horizon. A book titled Naming Jack the Ripper made headlines by claiming the identity of the infamous killer had finally been revealed through DNA testing. The authors pointed to Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber who was already considered a prime suspect by the police back in 1888. According to the book, mitochondrial DNA extracted from the shawl matched that of a living descendant of Kosminski's sister. It seemed the case had been solved at last. However, the excitement was short-lived. The scientific methods used in the study were quickly called into question. Experts argued that the chain of custody for the shawl was never properly established. No solid documentation proved that it was indeed recovered from the crime scene. Even worse, the shawl had been handled by countless individuals over the years, introducing the possibility of contamination. Critics also pointed out that mitochondrial DNA, while useful, isn't as conclusive as nuclear DNA. It can only point to a shared maternal lineage, which means the match wasn't necessarily unique to Kosminski. Moreover, the peer-reviewed journal article that accompanied the book failed to provide the level of detail and transparency that would allow other scientists to replicate the findings. The identities of the living relatives used for DNA comparison were kept secret, further undermining the credibility of the evidence. The claim lacked the rigorous standards required for scientific proof, and the debates surrounding Kosminski's guilt remained far from settled. This isn't the first time DNA has been invoked to identify Jack the Ripper. In the early 2000s, author Patricia Cornwell conducted her own investigation, targeting the painter Walter Sickert as the likely culprit. Cornwell funded a costly forensic analysis of letters attributed to the Ripper and compared the results to samples from Sickert's correspondence. While she believed the evidence was compelling, most experts remained unconvinced. As with the Kosminski theory, questions arose about whether the letters themselves were even authentic. Many were thought to be hoaxes written by journalists or members of the public. In the end, both attempts to use DNA evidence to expose the Ripper's identity fell short of providing definitive proof. The mystery endures not because we lack suspects, but because the passage of time, poor evidence preservation, and questionable sources make it nearly impossible to draw a firm conclusion. Some argue that we may never know for sure who Jack the Ripper really was, that the legend will continue to spark speculation for generations to come. Yet, the hope that science might one day uncover the truth persists. Each new technological advancement brings the possibility of revisiting old evidence with fresh eyes. For now, though, Jack the Ripper remains a ghost from the past, his shadow stretching across history, taunting us with unanswered questions.